Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this December 4, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Our opening story tonight, many Somali pirates are heavily armed and show tactical skill. However, friends, that's not the right slide coming up behind me on the screen. And if you'll stand by a moment, we'll just put our logo up on the screen for you. Let me see what is or is not happening. I see, said the blind man. Okay, somehow our last story wound up in the first position. We've got that straightened up. We'll go right back into the story. This first story to me is an almost unbelievable story, and how it underscores how man is writing the lesson in history that man simply cannot govern himself without Jesus Christ having returned and set up and restored the kingdom of God on this earth, where there's a combination of ruling with a rod of iron and ruling with love, true love, and with love defined for everyone in the same way. Love toward your neighbor, love toward God, summing it up in two great principles. Here's the story that's, to me, so incredible. The European Court of Human Rights says France violated the rights of Somali pirates. That's right. It says, let me back that up and read that to you again. The European Court of Human Rights says France violated the rights of Somali pirates who had attacked French ships, and has ordered compensation for these pirates over judicial delays. The 9 Somali pirates should get thousands of euros because they were not immediately brought before a French judge, the court ruled. Can you believe that ruling, friends? Asinine. Incredible. One of the pirates is to get 9,000 euros, equivalent of about 7,000 pounds, equivalent to about roughly, what would that be? That would be 7,000 pounds would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 13,000 United States dollars in the equivalent. And the other sums of up to, we'll just give it to you in the euros, and you can kind of figure it based on what I just gave you from there. Other sums of up to $7,000. The judges faulted France for keeping the pirates in custody for an extra 480 days. No, friends, I did that on purpose, wrong, just to illustrate how really asinine this ruling is. The judges faulted France for keeping the pirates in custody for an extra 48 hours. And for those extra 48 hours, did you hear the numbers I gave you? The astronomical money that France is being ordered to pay these pirates who attacked their ships. You know, they could have been shot Johnny on the spot for their piracy. And, you know, sometimes it seems law enforcement, in some cases, would do better to go ahead and just shoot the varmints, people doing criminal activity, than to arrest them and put them in situations where they gain all kind of incredible riots where international courts award astronomical sums against the government that they did wrong, that the pirates did wrong to. The pirates had held French citizens hostage after seizing a French-flagged cruise ship and a French yacht in 2008. You know, the penalty in the United States used to be, I don't know if it still is or not, but You kidnap someone, and that's essentially what taking someone hostage is a kidnapping. It was the death penalty. It was a capital offense to kidnap someone. The French military captured the pirates on the Somali coast in two operations after the hostages had been released for ransoms of $2.1 million. That's the equivalent of 1.3 million pounds. And then another $2 million. Indian Ocean shipping has been plagued by pirate gangs operating off Somalia in recent years, but international naval action in the region has sharply reduced the attacks. Before transferring the pirates to France, the authorities held one group for 4 days. They held one group for 4 days and the others for 6 days and 16 hours. But the extra 48 hours of custody on French soil violated the pirates' right to liberty and security under the European Convention on Human Rights, the court ruled. The convention's Article 5.3 was, quote, was not designed to give the authorities the opportunity to intensify their investigations for the purpose of bringing formal charges against the suspects, a court statement said. The judges argued that the time between their arrest and transfer to France was already enough for France to draw up charges instead of delaying for another 48 hours. Court judgments are binding on signatories to the convention. The judges did not challenge France's right to arrest the pirates inside Somalia territory under UN anti-piracy rules. You know, friends, it sounds like a little bit they got too technical because they've awarded these pirates. They've, for some minor infractionary type of quote-unquote human right abuse, an extra 48 hours. And considering what these guys are doing to people, these pirates, it's just, it underscores, and this is coming out of European court ruling, and underscores what can be anticipated once that, I'm going to put our chart on the screen behind me for a moment. Once the fifth seal goes into operation, the fifth seal being the Great Tribulation, which is a time when, let's pull that right into there. After the four seals that are accelerating, once the fifth seal, the next major event to happen in prophecy is the fifth seal from Revelation 6. Jesus Christ called it in Matthew 24, verse 21, the Great Tribulation. He said it's a time that's so bad that no time before it since the beginning of the world has ever been so bad, no, nor ever after will be as bad. And I miscited the other night, and I'll just correct myself now. I mentioned that the following verse 22 in Matthew 24, I mentioned it as being verse 21, just off the cuff, but the verse in verse 22, which I had cited as 21, that says, except those days shall be shortened, the time that I'm referring to that's called the Great Tribulation. If that time weren't shortened, there should no flesh be saved alive, as the Moffat translation puts it. But Christ adds right after that, he says, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. In other words, Christ will cut it short by returning and by intervening in world affairs. And sorry about that noise. I just knocked something off my desk as I put my Bible back on the desk behind me without looking. That was my water bottle. Thank you. Thankfully, it was empty. But friends, Jesus Christ promises to return just before man would annihilate all mankind. And he will, when he returns, He'll marry those he's called in the spring harvest, and he'll set up shop. He'll set up his throne. He'll restore the kingdom of God to this world as the King of Kings, with those called to the spring harvest who are counted worthy for the first resurrection to reign and rule with him as his wife, collectively as his wife on that throne. A wonderful and magnificent opportunity. Yes, it requires some sacrifice. It requires some diligent effort at what is pictured by the first series of the spring holy days, and that is the putting out of sin during the days of unleavened bread. We do it symbolically for 1 year by putting leavening out of our homes, but that's just a picture of what we're supposed to be doing all the rest of the year. And as God reveals some of the little blind spots we have, and we suddenly find, hey, I thought I was doing pretty good, but now I've got something else I've got to work on. That's been happening to me recently. I've told a few of you about that, and said, wow, I'm kind of shocked at some of the things God is showing me that I have got to spend some effort to put guards up against and push out of my life. And I'm not alone in that, and I'm not talking any strange language. If you're reading the Bible and you see how the Apostle Paul explained, he didn't understand certain things were a sin, except God's Word says this is a sin. A sin being a transgression of God's law, and a transgression that we have to put out of our lives. God wants obedience. Grace is not a license to sin. Grace is as, what was the name of the man from Santa Barbara who was in Santa Barbara for so long? Mr. Carlton Smith put it so well when he said, and what he said goes right along with the teachings that God has given us through his end-time apostle, Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong. Maybe I'm mentioning names that some of you don't recognize. Some of you, though, that tune in on a regular basis to this program will recognize some of those names I'm mentioning. But what Mr. Carlton Smith said goes hand in glove with the teachings and instruction and what the Bible says that God emphasized for us and gave us on a silver platter through Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, that grace is time to repent. God gives us time to repent. That's what grace is, as Mr. Carlton Smith well put it in a sermon he gave on how to prepare for the Passover. And for those who watch another channel that I have, another live streaming channel that I have, that I do basically primarily on the weekend, I need to, with 4 months to go before the next Passover for next year. The year actually is not beginning in just 2 or 3 weeks from now. Today's a little over 3 weeks from now. That's the pagan calendar. That's the pagan Roman calendar, with man setting the year to begin in the middle of dead winter. An absolutely illogical, crazy way to begin a year. The real year, as God begins it, begins when spring begins, when life is springing forth. And that's the beginning of God's calendar. And just shortly, within just 2 weeks after the beginning of the year on God's holy sacred calendar, the Hebrew calendar, it's the evening of the Passover, and immediately following that, and that's a feast day. It's not a holy day, but it is one of the feasts God mentions in Leviticus 23. Immediately following that, on the heels of Passover, begins the days of unleavened bread, with the first evening being a night to be much observed. All right, I'm going into things I don't usually go into in a lot of detail on this program, but this program leaves the door open for that, in that we bring you news related to the Bible and prophecy. And this, I wanted to mention that fifth seal, that next seal to open up and begin occurring in the future. It hasn't occurred yet, except in a small type way. If you read Fox's Book of Martyrs, you see a lot of martyrdom that on the behest of the Catholic Church. When they announced someone anathema, the Holy Roman Empire would put them to death, often with torturing, first to see if they would recant of the thing that made them anathema, and if they would not, then they were put on to death, or sometimes just put on to death anyway, in a torturous way. Often, a lot of them were burning at the stake. One man saying they just half burned him. He said, "For God's sake, man, please put on more fire, and finish the job. You leave somebody half baked." But they did do torture along with it, and that's the next thing to happen, but on a grand scale this next time. Great tribulation. Time of trouble so bad, nothing since the beginning of the world is as bad as it is going to be, and thankfully nothing ever again after it ever will be as bad again, Christ promises in his word. Again, that's in Matthew 24, verse 21. And then verse 22 saying that when man is, as a result of this great tribulation time, a time of World War III, a time of the revival of the Holy Roman Empire by the seventh and final head, thankfully Christ says when they get to the point where mankind would have annihilated all of mankind during this time, Jesus Christ will intervene. Actually, he intervenes more in the seventh seal, which is the day of the Lord. This great tribulation is not a punishment by God. This is punishment under the days of man and Satan. It's Satan's wrath. It's part of this next event to happen in prophecy, the fifth seal, the great tribulation. But once we get past that, 2.5 years of that, we see some heavenly signs, the sun, moon, and stars, the sealing of 144,000. Do I have that chart where I can bring it out? Let's see. I have this chart in a wider form somewhere here in my camera shots. If I can quickly find it, I'll spread it out for you and let you see how this chart widens out. Well, what happened to my shot there for that? Okay, well, you know what? I'm spending a lot of time on this, and I got a lot of news stories tonight. I can't find that among my shots. I'm going to have to fix my shots up, and we're spending a lot of time. Let me come on back here, friend. We're spending a lot of time working on getting some new software ready to roll from. Probably the way it's going to work out, it'll be the beginning of the pagan year when the year reference changes from 2014 to 2015. By then, we hope to have everything ready, maybe even a little bit before that, to roll out in some new software. We have to pay the licensing on it, so I'm working on getting a mortgage on my home so I can pay for that new software. Because with this old software, for some reason, and with the equipment we've been running, we're having some problems that is a little out of the ordinary. I just noticed, I look at the controls up there, the recording, the backup recording we usually make is not recording tonight. But we're on a live stream, and there's a recording from that, so I'll grab that for the archive, for those of you that watch in the archive. Just as long as we don't hit an interruption in the live stream and lose the signal, I should have a backup recording happening that way. But we've been having a lot of problems with this current software. It's been stuttering at times. Some of you heard that last night. Thankfully, some of you have told me, well, Steve, I hear it, but it's not too bad. So stay with us till you get your new software, and we can put up with a little bit of stuttering from I did that, but, now if the equipment did that at the same time I did that, it's going to really sound crazy. But the equipment's been doing that. The software's been doing that during the last couple of weeks for some reason, and that's prompted us to say, okay, I got to pull some stops out and get that new software that has been developed. We just, as I say, I got to pay for the license. Plus, it requires us to reset all our camera shots, and we're probably going to arrange for some new studio. I'm building a new one downstairs, and maybe all of that will come together at the same time. So beginning of the pagan Roman year, we may have some more upscale things. And those of you that might be wanting to watch on one of those huge screens at home, some of you told me, hey, your signal, when I blow it up, it's not all that hot. We'll be able to multi-stream with a high-definition stream for those of you that have that kind of equipment. But let's go on with the rest of this story that I was just giving you. The United States has revealed that it tried to rescue, we'll see, I'm with our next story. I actually finished that story on the pirates. That one kind of makes me a little hot under the collar to see Europe getting so technical in a situation where you've got pirates that frankly deserve to be strung up by their toes. Beaten first, hung up by their toes and hanged by their necks. And that crazy kind of foolishness cut out. But here they've rewarded them with thousands of dollars, thousands of euros because some little technical hang-up. Ay. That's this world. That's man's world, friends. And thankfully, Christ is coming. And that's that's the point of why I went off on my on our slide and mentioned that the next thing in prophecy to happen will be the fifth seal, the Great Tribulation. That has to happen before Jesus Christ returns. So even though that'll be a time of Jacob's trouble, a time of the worst trouble on mankind the world has ever known since the beginning of the world, and never again will be as bad as what's coming, we have to go through that first. So we can look forward to the bad times in a way, and there's a promise for those who are doing what Christ instructed to do in Luke 21, verse 36, where he told us to watch. And he was just describing the four seals that precede the fifth seal. He was telling you to watch as they accelerate. Then you'll know that summer is nigh, that the next seal is just at your door. And following that, you can clock it. Nobody knows how to clock it right now. We don't know when the fifth seal is going to begin exactly. It could be a few weeks, a few months, early part of next year. God could delay things and let it be another couple, 3 years. He could let it be another 5 or 20 if he needed to allow some of those he called more time. But at some point he's going to say, I have extended this thing and extended and delayed this thing as long as we're going to. Those of you that have got it together, great. Those of you that don't, touche, tough luck. We got to, at some point the mousetrap is going to snap. When God says time, that's it, And then following that, I wish I had the shot where I could zoom this out wider. I see we're having problems. Our software is losing some of our shots somehow. It's just maybe it's corrupted, but anyway, the Great Tribulation has to occur before the heavenly signs, and then before the day of the Lord, and then during those trumpets during the day of the Lord, the 7 trumpets that are part of the 7th seal, during the last trumpet, the 7th trumpet, Christ returns. And after 7 last plagues, his kingdom is set up, and we'll be looking at a millennium of wonder, of wonderful things. And it may take a few years, 3 decades to get a lot of things straightened out, but it's going to be a wonderful world tomorrow that under Christ's rule and reign. All right, friends, our next story. I better move into it very quickly. The United States has revealed it tried to rescue UK-born American hostage Luke Summers, who is being held by Al-Qaeda in Yemen. President Barack Obama authorized the mission last month, it said. Regrettably, quote, regrettably, Luke was not present, though hostages of other nationalities were present and were rescued, the National Security Council said. Alim Makboul has the full report in this video.
Well, it was this video really that started it all. This jihadi video appeared online, which shows Luke Summers, a 33-year-old photojournalist who was based in Yemen. He was an American citizen, but born in the UK, and he had been kidnapped in the capital of Yemen just over a year ago. And in this video, he says that he feels that his life is in danger, and he appeals for anyone who can do anything to free him to do that. But also we see a member of Al-Qaeda, and he talks about a foolish attempt, in his words, to rescue Mr. Summers. And it was after that that we heard from the Pentagon that they confirmed that indeed there had been a rescue attempt at the end of November, an unusual operation where American troops were actually involved on the ground in Yemen together with Yemeni soldiers. They got to the place where apparently Luke Summers had been held a few days earlier, but he'd been moved. They did manage to rescue other hostages, but he wasn't there. And now, of course, the risk in an operation like that is that if it fails, that there is the potential you might endanger further the hostages. And that is the message that Al-Qaeda was trying to get across in this video, that that attempt may have made things much more difficult for Luke Summers.
And what is known about this particular offshoot of Al-Qaeda?
Well, this is Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula, and that is somewhere they've had a base for a very long time. You know, for a long time we talked about hostages being taken in Yemen and treated very well in the tribal system, but those days, it would seem, are gone with the way Al-Qaeda's been operating. And certainly over the last few months, we've seen a series of these videos and beheadings by another Al-Qaeda affiliate, Islamic State. And there's certainly a sense in this video that there is some inspiration that's been taken from those Islamic State beheadings and kidnappings, because Islamic State, in one respect, has achieved its goal of gaining notoriety through the killing of Western hostages, but it has also drawn this American air campaign, and apparently that is doing some damage to Islamic State. But other jihadi groups have seen the propaganda, victories in the way they see it, that Islamic State has gained, and this appears to be a copycat.
Friends, the men responsible for the Vatican's finances. We do have a story tonight related to the first seal on our chart, the first seal being depicted in Revelation as a white horse on whom sits a man with a bow in his hand. And Jesus Christ relating in plain language, relating to this first seal, again depicted by a white horse with a rider on it holding a bow in his hand, said, "Be careful and don't be deceived." He says, "Many will come in my name, saying that indeed I am the Christ," that Jesus is the Christ, "and yet they will deceive many." Keep that first seal in mind as we talk about this first story. The man responsible for, I'm going to put our white horse up here for a moment. Let's move this. I better move that out of the way. Actually, we'll put that back up in the corner when I bring it out full in a minute. The man responsible for the Vatican's finances says he has found millions of euros tucked away off balance sheets. Cardinal George Pell, who heads, and that's him in this picture, Cardinal George Pell, who heads the Vatican's Secretariat for the Economy, said it meant the Holy See's finances were better than expected. He made the comments in the Catholic Herald in an essay outlining his vision for the Vatican. Pope Francis appointed Cardinal Pell as part of his efforts to reform the Church and make it more transparent. Quote, "It is important to point out that the Vatican is not broke," Cardinal Pell wrote. Quoting him further, he said, "Apart from the pension fund, the Holy See is paying its way while processing substantial assets and investments." Further quoting the Cardinal Pell, "We have discovered that the situation is much healthier than it seemed, because some hundreds of millions of euros were tucked away in particular sectional accounts and did not appear on the balance sheet, he added. Friends, can you imagine what would be in the news stories today if this kind of situation existed in God's church? Some of you know what I mean by that. If it existed in the Church of God when it was under Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong. But let's go back to this story, another quote. Well, actually, another comment from the lead-in for this story, or the main body of this story. There have been a number of scandals at the Vatican Bank, most recently last year when allegations were made the bank had been used by money launderers. Cardinal Pell did not say any wrongdoing had been found, but said Vatican departments long had, quote, an almost free hand with their finances. Pope Francis' reforms, he said, were, quote, already past the point where it would be possible to return to the bad old days, end quote. They aimed to make Vatican finances, quote, boringly successful, he added. At the time of Pope Francis' election, Cardinal Pell, who is Australian, had been vocal in his calls for financial reform. And friends, it was in July of 2013, a headline on the 17th of July that year, 2013, read this way: "The Vatican Bank is rocked by scandal again." And a year later, in July 2014, a headline on July 9, 2014, read, "Vatican overhauls scandal-hit bank." Now, a headline in today's Mail Online, today's December 4, 2014 Mail Online reads, "The Vatican's secret millions. Pope Francis finance minister admits Holy See squirreled away hundreds of millions off the books." That's the way the headline reads today in the Mail Online. And some of the significant points from that story in this current events news reads this way: "The Vatican squirreled away hundreds of millions of pounds in secret accounts," Pope Francis' Minister of Finance has revealed. Australian Cardinal George Pell said, now I can't use the photo from the article I'm reading to you from, but I can use this one from the BBC that we're licensed to utilize, friends. Cardinal Pell, in this picture, said that millions of euros had been found, quote, tucked away off official balance sheets in governing departments' accounts following a cleanup of the Vatican's shadowy finances. The bombshell statement follows the long overdue introduction of Vatican guidelines for modern accounting earlier this month. The Cardinal was appointed by Pope Francis to clean up the Vatican's murky finances after a series of scandals involving the Vatican Bank, which was suspected of money laundering. The unexpected windfall meant that the Vatican finances were healthier than we thought, Pell wrote in an article for the Catholic Herald. In fact, quoting him now, "In fact, we have discovered that the situation is much healthier than it seemed because some hundreds of millions of euros were tucked away in particular sectional accounts and did not appear on the balance sheet," he wrote. I read that to you in the earlier version of this story. Vatican departments were untroubled by modern accounting norms and had long been, quote, an almost free had long had, quote, an almost free hand with their finances, he wrote. They had a long-established tradition of managing their own affairs, he wrote. Very few were tempted to tell the outside world what was happening, except when they needed extra help. It was impossible for anyone to know accurately what was going on overall. And friends, I'm happy to report to you that the church I referenced a moment ago, the Church of God for this era of time that goes back to when it had some accusations made against it in the late 70s, early 80s, and a lawsuit by the state of California brought against it, it was found that that church had accounting firms, accounting firms of well report with good reputations, monitoring the finances of the church. And it got a clean bill of health. And there were no secret accounts set up and vast sums of money found in socks, hidden away somewhere. As in essence is this, take a lot of huge socks for all the money they had tucked away in this story. But let's go on with our next story now, friends, related to world events today. Putin warns of hard times ahead and calls for self-reliance. Vladimir Putin has used his annual State of the Nation address to attack the West for what he described as its hypocritical and cynical attitude to the conflict in Ukraine. Mr. Putin, you'll hear him say in this, as he stands before the parties before him in this video, saying he was certain that if Ukraine had not experienced a political crisis, the West would have come up with another excuse to contain Russian power. Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg reports.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
It was a grand entrance, but how does Russia exit an economic crisis? Falling oil prices and Western sanctions have pushed it to the brink of recession. Vladimir Putin's message to the nation: keep calm and blame the West. Even without the Ukraine conflict, President Putin said, the West would have come up with another excuse to restrain Russia's growing capabilities. But when we drove 3 hours from Moscow to the town of Ryazan, all we saw were growing problems. Yana Kindeeva still buys the basics, but prices are rising fast, and the ruble is falling fast. It's lost 40% of its value against the dollar this year. But Yana blames local officials, not Vladimir Putin.
The president is the head of our country, and he does everything for us to succeed. And people believe in the president. And
even when life gets tough.
Even when life gets tough.
Yana is not alone. Polls show that more than 70% of Russians think their president is doing a good job.
If this was Britain or America, then the scale of the problems Vladimir Putin is facing right now might be enough to pressure a leader to step aside. But Russia is not Britain or America, and Russians still desperately want to believe that the man at the top can put things right.
At the flea markets in the Ryazan, it's -10, but people are still selling anything they can find. No one here is happy with the state of their nation. And while some of these sellers, like Putin, blame the West, Yevgenia doesn't. Why is our government sending humanitarian aid to Ukraine, she asks. We should be getting some of that. Do you think we're out here because life is good? And that shows that however popular he may be now, Vladimir Putin can't take that for granted. The tougher life gets, the more Russians will seek scapegoats at home, and he could be one of them. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Ryazan.
Friends, our next story, I was just taking a look in Leviticus 26, where it begins by saying, if you diligently hearken to the voice of the Eternal, blessing after blessing after blessing. It starts out the same way in Deuteronomy 28. If you diligently hearken to the voice of the Eternal, your God, and obey Him, blessing after blessing after blessing are enumerated, both individually for people and collectively as a nation, especially the tribes of Israel whom God gave His law, and He expected some exemplary behavior on the part of the nation for the rest of the world, the sake of the rest of the world. And yet, unfortunately, sometimes the Gentiles show themselves with more character than the tribes of Israel, and so God allows His people to be punished. And God says, if you don't obey me, then just the opposite of those blessings, the cursings. And so for a long time, we in our church have called these two chapters the blessing and cursing chapters. Again, I'm referring to Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. And in Leviticus 26, God says that if you don't obey me, He says in both chapters, if you don't obey me, here are the curses. And if you still don't obey me, He says in Leviticus 26, I'll punish you 7 times more. And then if you're still not obeying, verse 19, Leviticus 26, God says, I will, as a nation, I will break the pride of your power. And many of the news events we see today are underscoring that that is happening to the tribe of Manasseh today, the modern-day people of America. And as you see the pride of America's power be broken, and a house divided cannot stand. Now we're seeing division. The God of this world will use those kind of tactics to divide the house. God will allow him to do that because we're not obeying God. And so God says, you don't obey me, I'll remove the blessings. And some of the blessings are rain in due season. 5 of you will chase 100. 100 of you will put 10,000 to flight. You won't have to worry about your enemies. Just a few of you can boom, take care of your enemies. And He says, I'll make you the head, not the tail, if you're obeying me. I'll make you the lender, not the borrower, if you are obeying me. That one alone ought to tell us, we in this country of America, from which this live video stream originates, this country's in trouble because we are a huge debtor nation. That alone should tell you, if you look at Leviticus 26 or Deuteronomy 29, hey, you guys, you're not obeying your Creator. Because he says if you obey Him, He'll make you the lender, not the borrower. But you guys are a great borrower and no longer a lender. Oh, you give away a lot of your money like a crazy fool. And you give it away trying to buy your lovers. You do it as a fornicator, as a man buying a prostitute, except this is the reverse. The prostitute is buying, let's see, how is it? The man usually buys the whore, the prostitute, but in this case, the whore, the prostitute is buying its lovers, is the way God puts it. Your sins are a stench before God because you're not obeying Him. You're ignoring your Creator. You're slapping Him in the face as if it were. And He says, I'll break the pride of your power. And in this next story, President Obama has said many, and in this next story, it's going to show you some, as I mentioned a moment ago, a house divided cannot stand. That's a principle in the Bible. And we've got a situation in this country that God is allowing the God of this world to play on us, where we're having a situation that's dividing the house. And a lot of this, you watch it for yourself. It's hard to call in a way. Some of you may have opinions one way or another. I certainly had my own opinion seeing the video in the situation with Michael Brown. Led me to look. 2 and 2, you add 2 and 2 together, you get 4. Not 5, 6, 7, or 9, or 20. You get 4 when you add 2 and 2 together. This later video, though, this of an event more current than Michael Brown. And, it would, to add impact to it, it comes right on the heels of the Michael Brown thing. So God of this world having a field day with this, and God, the God of heaven, allowing this to be stirred up in a way because this nation is not obeying its Creator, and God is allowing the pride of our power to be shaken by all these events. Here's the way the lead-in for this next story reads. President Obama has said many Americans sense a deep unfairness within the U.S. criminal justice system following the death of another black man who was, this man was placed in an apparent chokehold by a white police officer. So, see, God of this world having a field day, setting up a climate, a culture of the cultures against one another. And yet, because of this story having not the same evidence the other one had, that you had somebody that had just committed a thievery in a store, in the case of Michael Brown, and then pushed the store owner around and just showed himself with a belligerent, disrespectful attitude, which would follow. He would treat the police officer the way he did and get himself shot because of it. In this other case, a lot of white people are seeing it as, hey, the police were a little abusive, especially the situation, the sin or the criminal act that the man was creating was of such a insignificant nature in a way that what happened didn't seem to fit, and it was, there. Let me show you the video and let you make your own opinions on it. Let me give you the lead in. The Justice Department said it would investigate the death of Eric Garner, the more recent black man who was killed during an incident with police in a confrontation in New York goes back to July 17, though, actually. It's just that here's what's happened recently. A grand jury decided against charging the officer, and that factor sparked protest across the city. Nick Bryant has this report.
Modern-day marchers in the ongoing struggle for black equality, converging on New York's most famous landmarks in fury and frustration.
Can't breathe! Can't breathe!
Can't breathe, can't breathe, they cried, echoing the final words of Eric Garner, the unarmed black man who they believe was choked to death by a New York City policeman.
They hired and sworn to protect us. Instead, they murder us. We have to bury our sons, our brothers, our husbands, our fathers at the hands of the police.
There's not just a sense of profound injustice, but a sense of profound racial injustice. The belief that black and white Americans are being treated differently under the law.
That was the theme that America's first black president took up tonight, making some of the strongest comments yet on the iniquities of the criminal justice system.
Too many Americans feel deep unfairness when it comes to the gap between our professed ideals and how laws are applied on a day-to-day basis.
The anger is not just confined to minority communities. What was striking about this protest at Grand Central Station was its multiracial character. Enacting significant racial change in America has always required a groundswell of white support. And New York's mayor believes this should be a moment of national reckoning.
People need to know that black lives and brown lives matter as much as white lives. It's what we still have to aspire to. I said it yesterday, I believe it. This is not just a problem in New York City. It is an American problem, an American challenge. It's an issue that goes back to the founding of this republic that we still haven't resolved. Our generation has to resolve it.
This is the reason the case resonates so strongly. The videotape showing Eric Garner being apprehended for allegedly selling cigarettes illegally. Everyone can see the fatal chokehold. Everyone can hear his desperate cries.
I don't know what video they were looking at. evidently it wasn't the same one that the rest of the world was looking at. You know, how could we put our trust in the justice system when they fail us like this?
And it's precisely that question which makes these protests and makes this moment so meaningful.
All right, friends, I wanted you to see what is in today's current news that could have some impact on the way the House of the United States stands, falls, or whatever happens in the next days, weeks, and months ahead with the United States. As we do our last couple of stories, this next one, sad to report in a way because it involves a comedian that so many of us used to enjoy. I remember a line, I've said it so often, that was initiated by the particular comedian you're going to hear about in this story. When I give you that line, some of you will immediately recognize, oh, I know who you're talking about. I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. That was a famous comedian line many of us perhaps have often used by the American comedian Bill Cosby. In this next video story, friends, you'll see how he has been urged to waive his rights under the statute of limitations so the courts can hear new allegations of sexual assault. 3 women have gone public with claims that Bill Cosby groped and assaulted them. However, the alleged incidents happened more than 30 years ago, too long ago for the cases to come to trial under the principle of law called the statute of limitations, which Bill Cosby is being asked, as you'll hear in this video, to waive. Alistair Leithhead reports.
3 more women going public with their allegations against Bill Cosby.
It could be
the celebrity lawyer, Gloria Allred, is representing them. She brought the media to hear this latest raft of accusations against the comedian.
I believe that Mr. Cosby drugged me and sexually assaulted me that night. For years, I did not tell anyone about what he had done to me because I was afraid.
Beth Ferrier claimed she had an affair with Bill Cosby in the mid-1980s, and that he attacked her in Colorado after they'd broken up. Then Helen Hayes spoke. She claimed the star had groped her in 1973.
He approached me from behind and reached over my shoulder and grabbed my right breast.
Oops, sorry.
And finally, Chelan. She didn't give her surname. In 1986, she was a 17-year-old aspiring model working at the Las Vegas Hilton, who also claimed she was drugged and assaulted.
I could not open my eyes. I couldn't move or say anything.
She alleged he'd assaulted her in the Elvis Presley suite, and then when she came to, gave her $1,500.
Friends, there's more in the story, but that's the basis of it, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more related to that story in the future. A couple more things I want to cover before we close tonight. Foreign troops officially end their combat mission in Afghanistan in less than a month's time. As the deadline approaches, more than 50 countries are attending a conference in London to discuss how to boost the country's prospects after the withdrawal. International donors are being asked to commit to new development projects or risk seeing the country collapse. However, security fears are already damaging the Afghan economy, reports Mike Wooldridge from Kabul.
The city on edge after a spate of almost daily attacks, a lunchtime scene that could be anywhere in the world. This restaurant in an upmarket district of Kabul has just recently opened for business. Those behind it see Afghans as hungry for change, and this as an investment that's worth the risk.
We just want to give some good food and some good place where families can enjoy and they can come along with their friends and families and can have a good time here. So we took that challenge and we believe that we can come out with it in this situation.
This is one face of Afghanistan as the international combat mission draws to a close and continuing support for the country is discussed at the talks in London. But if this represents confidence in the future, the economic and security challenges in particular remain grave. That Afghanistan now has a government of national unity was an important step, but only the first.
And this is another face of Kabul and other cities: unemployment. Osman Sangin has been jobless for almost 12 months after working in the media for 13 years. I've tried many places, many offices, he says, but because foreigners are leaving, that's affecting the economy, and I haven't had any positive response. I know many other people who have lost jobs. The recent Taliban attacks, largely targeting foreigners, inevitably a concern as the new Afghan government engages with its international partners this week. But it's the government's longer-term plans for managing security, for reform, and also for reconciliation that are the wider agenda. Mike Wooldridge, BBC News, Kabul.
Friends, one of our last stories now, the last couple of stories, the ashes of John Henry Patterson, a soldier, big game hunter, and writer who died in 1947, are to be reburied in Israel after a state funeral attended by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He gained hero status in Israel for leading Jewish fighters during World War I, becoming a passionate Zionist. His reburial is the final act of an extraordinary life, which has inspired 3 Hollywood movies, as Kevin Connolly reports.
In death, John Henry Patterson has been saluted as a hero of Israel, the country he campaigned to create but never lived to see. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was on hand to thank the last living relative of the colonel who died in California in 1947, the year before Israel was born. In life, John Henry Patterson was every inch the British imperial hero, a soldier who won medals in battle and an engineer who built bridges in the jungle.
Where do you think you're going? I'm gonna sort it out.
His exploits made him famous. At Tsavo in southern Kenya, he hunted and killed 2 man-eating lions who terrorized his workers. The story has inspired 3 Hollywood movies based on Patterson's own memoirs. In the First World War, he served with Jewish volunteers in the Zion Mule Corps, carrying ammunition through the slaughter of Gallipoli. That made him the first commander to lead a Jewish regiment in battle in thousands of years, and it made Zionism his life's cause. These photographs from the Netanyahu family archive show him with the parents of Israel's current Prime Minister in New York, where they campaigned for the Jewish state. Patterson became godfather to their first son, Yonatan, a commando and national hero who died leading the hostage rescue operation at Entebbe in Uganda.
John Henry Patterson was the godfather of my brother, who 30 years later would command one of the great military rescue missions of all time. The rescue at Entebbe, where 103 Jewish hostages were rescued from the clutches of German and Palestinian terrorists. And I think there is a fateful set of events here, that this man, who 60 years earlier founded the first Jewish fighting force, is the godfather of one of the great commanders that rose in the Jewish army that he helped bring about.
John Henry Patterson is perhaps largely forgotten in the country whose cause he served. Now he is remembered in the country whose cause he made his own. Kevin Connolly, BBC News, Israel.
Friends, that's it for our Thursday night report. Sunday night, I'll have a video for you that explains why oil prices have been on such a long losing streak since 2008, which may be good for consumers and why you can expect it to go on a little longer, but is causing financial pain for some countries who are the net exporters of the black stuff. We'll try to cover that Sunday night. We're off between now and Sunday. We're off not on Friday or Saturday night. So I wish everyone a wonderful weekend coming up. Thanks for joining me this Thursday night. Until next time, friends, this is your host for Nightcast, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.